expand our imagination.
Justification for being what you
And welcome again to Washington Unplugged. I'm Bob Schieffer, and today we're going to talk with the one and only Buzz Aldrin about President Obama's promise to boldly go where no man has gone before, destination Mars. Then we're going to kick off our inaugural episode of Flashpoints with our national security analyst Juan Zarate, and then our Kaylee Hartung will be here on public diplomacy in the digital age. Why is it a controversial topic? And how is the new media changing the foreign policy landscape? But first, Buzz Aldrin. I asked him about President Obama's pledge to orbit Mars. What does he think about U.S. support for the future of NASA and space exploration?
Very clever about it. And I hate to say this, but we were not clever implementing the vision for space exploration with 2 rockets. We don't need 2 rockets to do that. We need Ares 1 plus Ares 5. Okay, real quickly, that's something like 1 plus 5 gets us to the moon times Ares. Why not 3 plus 3? They're the same rocket, okay? And we can put as much fuel, cargo, or people on each one, and as many as we want, and they're all so much cheaper.
And what will we get out of this?
I don't know. What is the return from the moon that begins to pay the expense? Knowledgeable people will say, water will give us fuel. Sure, we can drink the water for the people there, but if you don't send people there, you don't need to drink the water. Robots can mine things. It's only a second and a half way for robots to perform. The better we're getting with robotic control. The robots that are on Mars, Spirit and Opportunity, have been there for 5 years. They're sent instructions every day, and they're very conservative instructions. If it gets into trouble, stop, don't do anything. The program manager of Spirit and Opportunity told me, and then put it in writing, that if we had a controller at this moon of Mars, less than a second transmission away from things on the surface, we could get the job of those 2 Spirit and Opportunity done in 1 week. Can you imagine the efficiency of being able to do that? This Phobos is, and it looks like this. There's a big crater in it, and I just had this model delivered to me at 7:15 yesterday morning, so I could sort of show it to a few people. In the 80s, when we were about to build a space station, I said to people, the moon has 6 flags on it. It's a better space station than putting something in low Earth orbit. Okay? I was right then. I was wrong now, because this moon is the key to permanence of human beings from the planet Earth on another planet in the solar system. Can you name me anything in the progress of humanity that will come close to that in terms of significance? Those people who go there, like the pilgrims in the Mayflower, didn't hang around Plymouth Rock waiting for the return trip. You want people there for sustainability, and I'll use little allegories to help sink in.
That's a pretty good argument. Now, I've got to ask you about one other thing.
It sure is, but those people, there are thousands that want to go down in history as being the first people to set up pioneering. The most respected profession for Americans is pioneering. Now, how about the leader who charts a course, an unequivocal course? It may be a 2-phase. We may reaffirm this initiative. When would be a good time? 10 years. What happens in 10 years? The 50th anniversary of lunar lander. I hope to be around, okay? And I want to see him reaffirm permanence on Mars in the next 15 years.
All right, now I've got to ask you this question.
Yeah.
Would you rather be remembered as the second man on the moon or the first astronaut on Dancing with the Stars?
I don't see anything wrong with both. If people choose to take it that way.
How was that? Why did you do that, and was it fun? You look like you were having a blast.
I did that for the same reason that I got Quincy Jones to endorse Snoop Dogg and Kweli and the rap song that we wrote called Rocket Experience that people can download on iTunes. I did a rap song. Why would an astronaut want to do a rap song? Because the rap people are not normal supporters of the space program. And the space program people are not, if they're 50s and 60s, are not rappers, okay? But you bring those together and they begin to intermingle. You put me. What has Buzz done? Well, you chose to say it. He was second on the moon. Not last man on the moon, not first man, but second. Okay, I'm not trying to change history. I didn't really want to be first, but nobody's going to believe that. But where does it put the premium for this country of ours? Only on gold medals. Only on winners. Are the only people we're interested in commemorating for John F. Kennedy, the first landing? How about the first people that went? 24 Americans. But you know, most people in the media, they ask the question, how many people landed on the moon? Mm-hmm. We could not have landed if we had not sent 2 missions there ahead, one without a lander and one as a dress rehearsal. We could not have come home if Mike Collins had not brought us home.
Yeah. Well, I tell you this, you're a great advocate for the space program, and you're somebody that everybody in America can be proud of. Thank you, Buzz.
Well, I want to share things with all of your people, and whenever I can do that, I'm learning to do what I detested doing, and that's why I didn't want the publicity, really, of being on the first landing on the. But that's okay. That was my job, and I did it the best.
Well, I think
I could.
you're doing it pretty well. Thank you. Buzz Aldrin. Well, today we're going to kick off our new weekly series, Flashpoints, with our national security analyst, Juan Zarate, where we're going to take a close look each week at the top and then the below-the-radar stories in the world of foreign policy. This week, we're going to wrap up the nuclear summit, tougher sanctions on Iran, the revolt in Kyrgyzstan, and the mysterious sinking of a South Korean warship. Juan, let's start with the summit.
Let's do it, Bob. President Obama, I think, succeeded this week in getting the world's attention on an issue that he thinks is critical, and I think is critical from a security perspective. 47 world leaders were here to talk about proliferation and the opportunity to lock down nuclear material so that terrorists can't get their hands on it. The president not only got a communique and a work plan, the kinds of things you usually get from these diplomatic engagements, but he got some real world commitments from the Ukrainians, from Mexicans, to actually get rid of some of this weapons grade material. This is important, and he used a lot of capital here. You only get so many bites of the apple bringing that many world leaders to Washington. And so I think that was an important event, and we'll see what happens from it.
The latest news on Iran sanctions, and that is that Brazil seems to be going with China and India in their attitude that maybe we don't want tougher sanctions. Where does this all come out?
Well, the Iran sanctions issue is complicated. It's a mixed bag, I think, and I think it's trending badly for the administration, actually, because with this Brazilian statement, what you have is a reinforcement of the notion that both they're not in favor of sanctions. Brazil sits on the UN Security Council along, obviously, with China and Russia, but also that the haggling is going to be all about the sanctions and getting the sanctions. And I think we actually take a step back in that regard. We already have 3 sanctions against Iran, and the fact that we're haggling this hard over another sanctions is really problematic. That said, Bob, the good news is that a lot of the action on the financial pressure on Iran is happening as we speak. The private sector is actually pulling out of Iran quite dramatically. Petroleum firms, insurance firms. Just this week, a Malaysian petroleum company has pulled out. And so this is happening under the radar screen, and this is important because it's starting to hurt the Iranians.
Kyrgyzstan. You know, I'll have to ask you the famous city editor's question when you work at a newspaper. You come back when you're a young reporter, and the editor will always say to you, why should I care about this?
Yeah.
Why is this important to Americans?
Well,
or is it?
Well, I think so. Kyrgyzstan is important for 2 reasons. One, the U.S. has a very important base there called the Manas Air Base, which is a logistical hub, very important for our activities in Afghanistan. 2, Kyrgyzstan has in some ways become a proxy battle between Russia and the United States in terms of influence in Central Asia. And so both influence over whether or not the U.S. would actually have a base and the question of whether or not the U.S. or Russia would be seen as preeminent is very important in Kyrgyzstan. And so I think we've averted a crisis with the step down of the president, the overthrow, and now the hard work of diplomacy is underway. And you see the United States sending diplomats into the country. You see the Russians trying to influence with aid to Kyrgyzstan. And so all of this is going to play out. But the key for the United States is keeping that base open.
All right, and then the one that didn't get all that much publicity, South Korea. It's believed that the ship, a South Korean ship, was hit by some sort of a bomb or something. Is there a possibility of involvement by North Korea?
Well, that's the million-dollar question in this investigation that the South Koreans have, Bob. And this is one of those stories that we have to keep a very careful eye on because the South Koreans have launched this investigation based on the sinking of the vessel in late March. It's not clear what caused it, but the leading theory is that it was either a torpedo or a mine laid by the North Koreans. And the question is, if the South Koreans, who have opened this investigation to the international community, conclude that the North Koreans were involved, what do? They can't appear weak, but they don't want to start a war. And the U.S. has an interest in making sure this doesn't flare up.
So what do we do?
Well, I think we act as a diplomatic calmer for the situation. I think we help with the investigation. We see where it leads, but we try to make sure that it doesn't escalate in a way that is uncomfortable for not only the people in the region, but also for the United States.
All right, Juan Zarate, thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob.
Our new Flashpoint series. Speaking of foreign policy, we brought together some people this week at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, including Juan here, to talk about how foreign policy is being handled in this world of new media that we're all dealing with. And our Kaylee Hartung was there, and she has some highlights. Kaylee?
Thanks, Bob. You broke a little new ground at CSIS this week. Brought together current and former government officials, as well as innovators from the private sector, to discuss how technology is changing the public diplomacy landscape. And in this world where terrorists are increasingly using this technology for their own purposes, government officials are constantly looking for ways to push back.
We're in a very new and different world now, aren't we?
I think you're absolutely right, and I think we have focused often with how the bad actors end up using the technology. And we have to remember the technology is neutral from a policy perspective and with respect to morality. Certainly terrorist groups, Al-Qaeda and others use these technologies to communicate, to fundraise, to radicalize, to recruit. But I think what we're finding now, and as we talk about public diplomacy in the new digital age, is trying to think about the other side of the ledger.
The government is increasingly collaborating with the private sector. They are working together using technology to advance U.S. national interests.
But the important thing is that there's actually, people often talk about government being behind the curve. When it comes to technology applied to foreign policy challenges, I would actually argue that it's a rare instance of government actually being with the curve. And in particular, early on in this administration, whether it was Iran or Moldova or the Uyghurs in China, we saw a demand on the part of this broader definition of civil society taking their advocacy into cyberspace. And cyberspace is not something separate from the traditional civil society that we know. It's an extension. And so our feeling inside the government, and in particular the Secretary of State's feeling, was if people are taking their advocacy into an extended version of civil society, then our policies that are empowering them, protecting them, and enhancing their ability to get around things like human rights violations, politically motivated censorship, you name it, need to also expand to a broader civil society.
We just came back from a trip in Russia, and we had the CEO of eBay, John Donahoe, Jack Dorsey, the creator of Twitter, Padmasri Warrior, the CTO of Cisco. Really, because of Jared reaching out to the private sector, and back to this point, it's actually one of the rare instances where the government has been ahead of the curve. I'd say the private sector has been behind the curve in the sense of using and understanding the role that we could play.
As technology evolves, the government is challenged to find innovative ways to apply that technology to foreign policy making.
Okay, Kaylee. I really like the old guy there. He has good questions.
I've seen him somewhere before.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Juan, for being with us today. That is Washington Unplugged. Catch us here every day on CBSNews.com. And don't forget to see us on television Sunday on Face the Nation when we'll have an exclusive interview with Massachusetts Senator Scott Brown. Well, you heard Buzz Aldrin talk about it a while ago. We're going to leave you today with his rap song, Rocket Experience. Enjoy it and have a great weekend.
What you need is the rocket experience. All you need is the rocket experience.
To go flying into outer space. See this world as a beautiful place. All mankind, one human race.
I tell a story about my time on the moon now. The sky was black even though the sun shined on. Moonwalking such a trip, it's so fine when you're walking in the lunar dust. It took us 4 days riding on a rocket to set foot for the very first time. I'm gonna tell you about the meaning of it all. We came in peace for all mankind. Imagine a place above the sky, riding orbits in 90 minutes time. All you need is to come with me. I'll be your guide.
To go flying into outer